and welcome to this course about overall hygiene proficiency and working with food safely. This course is by Anako. The course topics can be divided into 6 categories. These are perishable foods and what they are, food premises and what is meant by the term, basics of microbes, hygiene when working with food, own check plan that every food premise has, and then in the very end I'll tell you a little bit about the hygiene proficiency examination. Then let's begin. Perishable foods and what is meant by the term. What kind of foods can we consider as very easily perishable? What comes to mind are fish and raw products and in a larger scale all seafood. What else? Milk and dairy products can be considered as easily perishable, and also in a sense egg products. The main idea that you need to remember when talking about food safety and hygiene proficiency is that all food goes bad at some point. The main goal in hygiene proficiency is not to stop that, but make sure that the food is safe the time it's meant to be used, and for example that the customer can rely on the date that's marked on the package when buying food goods in the supermarket. What's something in general, a guide rule in all hygiene proficiency working with food is that you need to remember that in every process phase there's also a risk to food safety presented. That can mean chopping, slicing, for example. Then to the term food premise and what's meant by it. A food premise are all the spaces where food is either prepared, stored, served, sold, transported, or otherwise handled. That can mean, for example, an internet shop that sells only packed food goods. Their warehouse, in a sense, is also considered to be a food premise. The main idea behind the term is that the food goods stored or handled in food premises are not meant for own consumption. What food premises then should have? What are the general guide rules? They should have at least a separate area for washing of hands, a place to wash dishes if the food goods are served, prepared, good ventilation in general, appropriate temperature and lighting considering the food goods that are stored or handled, easy access to water is something really important, a separate cleaning closet from, for example, the kitchen area, toilets behind 2 doors, looking from, for example, the kitchen area, once again, a floor drain, that's something really important and crucial in most of the food premises, costume closets for employees, where they can keep their work clothes that are used in the food premises, enough work and storage space, considering the type of things that are meant to be done with the food goods. These are the basic things you need to consider. Also, easily washable surfaces in terms of hygiene is something that needs to be taken into account. Then to the general rules of working in food premises. I mentioned already easily washable surfaces. As a general rule, there's a continuous control of cleanliness in food premises. This means that it's a responsibility of everybody working in the food premise to also pay attention every day to cleanliness. This means, for example, that waste control is daily. Bio-waste must be taken out every day. Also, in food premises, for example, in the kitchen areas, all smoking and eating is also forbidden. As a general rule, also animals are not allowed in the food premise areas. Then to basic information about microbes and how they affect our food safety. In general, microbes are very small organisms that we can't see with our normal eyes. They can be divided in terms of food safety into 3 categories. Those that are useful to us, we for example use them when making the food. Those that are harmful to us and our safety. And then the 3rd category, those that have no meaning in terms of safety. Doesn't affect us. Another way of dividing microbes into categories is dividing them into bacteria, yeast and molds, and then viruses. They all have a bit of a different way of working in food goods. What are bacteria? Bacteria is the type of microbes that increases rapidly in food goods when the conditions are good for that certain bacteria. This can mean, for example, the right temperature. So temperature control, especially looking at bacteria, is crucial when talking about food safety. Some bacteria can form spores into the food goods. Others work by creating toxins in the food good. Yeast and molds form spores in food goods and also myceliums, through which they increase in the food good. Some molds can also create toxins in the food. And then the 3rd category, viruses. What's important to remember about them is that they can't increase in food. But in terms of food safety, they can remain and spread through food. The number increasing happens only after consumption the food good containing the virus. Then to the affecting factors of microbes. What are the ways through which we can have an impact on microbes and them working in the food goods? These are temperature and controlling them, as mentioned, nutrients in the food good, humidity in overall of the food good, oxygen level. For example, in the package we have vacuum packages. And then pH is also something to be considered. Then to overall employee hygiene when working with food, what are the ways in which we monitor employees who work with our food? When you start working in food premises, the first thing you usually have is a health check. These are often also regular, also while working with food goods. When taking the first health check, you are usually also asked for Salmonella certificate. Salmonella certificate is asked in the beginning when you start working with food, and then also if there's some reason why it should be suspected, or you travel, for example, for a longer period abroad. When starting working with food, you are also asked for the hygiene passport. So this is why you need to take the hygiene proficiency examination we'll talk about later. In overall, while working with food, there are certain things you should pay special attention to. First and foremost, you can never talk too much about washing of hands while working with food, especially unpackaged food. And then another thing, the use of gloves. Okay, I'll admit maybe not those in the picture, but use of gloves while working with unpackaged food goods. Wounds and in general your skin condition should be monitored while working with food. Also, your working clothes should be separate from the ones you use on a daily basis. And that includes also your shoes, the shoes you use in food premises. No jewelry while working is allowed. Food premises, the kitchen area, the risks in terms of food safety must be minimized. Then temperatures as hygienic work manners. There are two types of temperatures. In terms of regulations, you should not mix. These are serving temperatures and then preservation temperatures. In terms of preservation, food goods that are stored in fridge temperatures should be from 3 to 6 degrees. And then if you have easily perishable food goods like fish and seafood, they should be stored in even colder conditions. This means from 0 to 3 degrees. If you mean to put something in the freezer, in food premises, the freezer should be at least minus 18 degrees. Then to serving temperatures. This is something you need to remember. Serving temperatures are only for serving. This means that the food goods can't stay in those temperature ranges for more than 4 hours. That's the maximum time allowed. If you are serving cold foods, the temperature should be a maximum of 12 degrees. If the food goods are meant to be served hot, the temperature should be at least 60 degrees while serving the food good. Then to sanitation and cleaning. When talking about food safety, cleaning and sanitation is crucial. You can never talk too much about it. You should use adequate equipment, and also the cleaning liquids you have should be specifically for food premises. They are often water soluble. Cleaning and sanitation of food premises is a continuous process. It's also part of the own check plan that every food premise must have for itself. It's something that's part of everyday work while working with food. In terms of sanitation and cleaning, it is also important to talk about the general guidelines for cleaning and doing things in food premises. The basic model, or to say order, you could use is remove first all loose dirt in food premises. After that, clean with cold water, for example. The cold wash comes first. Why? So you don't burn your dirt as a bottom or base for microbes to work. After the cold wash or rinse, so to say, comes manual work. This means, for example, the scrubbing phase. In dishwashers, in food premises, also water does the manual work. Only after this should you clean or rinse with hot. Why? It speeds, for example, the drying process, for example, of plates, so that it doesn't have that much water for microbes to work. And at last, if needed and wanted, comes disinfection. Then to own check. It's a law-based thing that every food premise must do. It is mandatory for every food premise to have their own check plan. What it means, the term, it means the things that everybody working in the food premise, the employees, for example, do on a daily basis to check that food is safe. This can mean a number of, for example, rules, guidelines we have in our workplace to make sure that the food is safe. So it can be recipes, it can be notes on how we clean things in our food premise, a collection of papers and guidelines, rules for our workplace. A part of your own check plan in a food premise is also assessing your critical control points. This means that every food premise must consider what are the most critical control points we have in our workplace where there could be a risk for food safety presented, and how to minimize these risks. Then, at last, to the hygiene proficiency examination. What it means and how you obtain the hygiene passport. After taking the examination, you will receive the hygiene passport. That gives you the permit or the certificate that you have the basic knowledge of hygiene proficiency and food safety when it comes to working with food. The hygiene passport you obtain is valid for now, so it has no expiration date mentioned on it. The test in itself requires a valid ID. The test in itself contains 40 right and wrong questions you need to answer. The number of points you need to get is 34 from the maximum 40.